Ace retreated a few rungs. Phillips could hear the others scrambling further down. He got his head out of the way before pulling the switch that opened the hatch. With a subdued humming of electric motors, the massively constructed door swung down. One after another, they pulled themselves up into the compartment. This must be where they set controls for launching, guessed Phillips, leaning back against a rack of emergency spacesuits. That intercom screen on the bulkhead is probably plugged into the control room. Looks as if the torpedoes themselves are stored under that hatch at the after end. How do they kick them off? Asked Brecken. Those conveyor belts run them into tubes in the forward bulkhead. A charge of compressed air blows them out, and then the rockets are started, controlled by radio. You mean we have to point at the target to fire? Oh no. Once the rockets are going, the torpedoes can be maneuvered and aimed anywhere by remote control. I've seen enough, announced Truesdale. I'm hungry. At that, they all decided to return to the main deck. Phillips carefully closed the airtight hatch as they left, then followed the others in search of the galley. Later, after a very unsatisfying meal of packaged concentrates, they loitered sullenly in the control room once more, while Donna studied the controls. Phillips had finally decided he could wear the third spacesuit on the rack if he had to. He was idly examining the tools supplied with it when his thoughts were interrupted. Young Truesdale had been monkeying with the range indicator for some time, but now his sharp outcry drew all eyes to him. The others immediately gathered to peer over his shoulder. A needle flickered wildly from one side of the dial to the other. Here, get it balanced, said Phillips, thrusting a powerful arm between the crowded bodies. As his deft adjustment steadied the needle, he stepped back and leaned against the bulkhead to study their faces. Truesdale was pale. It's them, he panted. Well, asked Donna, what will it be? What do you mean? Demanded Brecken, red-faced. It'll be damn well get out of here. That's what it'll be. Let's see you go, invited the girl coolly. How well do you pilot a rocket? Brecken's jaw dropped. What? You crazy? Did you swallow all that stuff the old man told you? He sputtered. Why not? Asked Donna. They didn't bring us all the way out here for nothing. Violet was scared. If it's that dangerous, somebody just has to do it. And we're here. Not for long, said Brecken in an ugly tone. Get hot on those controls. You, Phillips, run back to that rocket room and see that things work. You try it, suggested the engineer quietly. He would have preferred to avoid the trouble the girl had been stirring up, but he did not relish Brecken's tone. A few days off Luna, he reflected, and already he was getting independent. Listen, said Donna, encouraged in her defiance. When I touch those controls, we'll go right up and touch noses with them. You'd better have a torpedo ready. She turned to the banks of buttons and switches. Muffled thunder from the stern jets trembled through the hull as the men staggered. Brecken recovered his balance first. With a snarl, he grabbed the girl by the nape of the neck and shook her roughly. Glimpsing Philip's cold sneer, he reached back and seized a heavy metal bar from the spacesuit rack. Now, damn it, he grated. You'll do like I tell you, and you'll get back there, see that those tubes recharge okay. Phillips felt a hard anger swelling his throat. From the corner of his eye, he saw Truesdale shrink back against the bulkhead. He glanced about desperately for something with which to parry Brecken's bar. It was the girl who broke the tense silence. With a gasping intake of breath, she reached up to claw at Brecken's face. Cursing, the man twisted his head away to protect his eyes. He released his grip on the girl's neck and swung a clumsy backhand blow at her head. Donna stumbled and collapsed to the deck. Now or never, Phillips told himself. Without waiting to think, he hurled himself forward. Brecken saw him coming and tried to shift himself around to meet the engineer's charge. Phillips crashed into him shoulder first, and they both brought up against the opposite bulkhead with a thud. He concentrated all his strength in wringing the other's forearm until he heard the bar clang to the deck. Brecken clubbed him on the side of the head with a wild left swing, and Phillips found the big man's foot in the way when he tried to sidestep it. He lost his balance but kept his grasp on the other so that they went down together, thrashing about for some opening. Brecken was red-faced with a maniacal rage. Beads of saliva sprayed from his twisted lips as he sputtered curses. The engineer let go suddenly and jolted the other under the chin with the heel of his left hand. The man arched backwards, but Phillips caught a knee in the chest that sent him slithering across the deck. As he strove to twist to his hands and knees, he saw Brecken groping for the bar. Never reach him, thought Phillips frantically. Thrusting one foot against the leg of an anchored data desk, he raised himself half upright as he lunged desperately at Brecken. Strangely, it occurred to Phillips for a fleeting lapse of time that old Varret had been reasonably astute in his selections, if he desired violent-tempered throwbacks. Then the breath was knocked out of him as he smashed into Brecken with a force that sent them both hurtling into the bulkhead. The other's grunt of pain was almost lost beneath the sharp smack of bone against metal. Phillips scrambled up hastily, but his opponent lay still. Over by the data desk, Donna was beginning to squirm quietly and make groping motions with her outstretched hands. Truesdale had retreated to the forward end of the control room, his features blanched by apprehension. "I'll bet," thought Phillips, "that old Varret slipped up in your case, my lad. Your reaction to violence must be what they call normal." He beckoned brusquely. "Give me a hand with him," he ordered. Brecken still showed no sign of consciousness. Truesdale approached warily, and, with his aid, Phillips lifted the unconscious man, with their limp burden in their hands. They staggered down the corridor to one of their sleeping compartments. There they slung him into a bunk. "He needs attention," said Truesdale. "He won't get it from me," snapped Phillips. "Lumps on the head were his idea. There's no time to fool with him." He pulled the sliding door shut, noticing that it had no lock. Since Brecken would probably be some time recovering, however, he put that out of his mind. Having returned to the control room, they discovered Donna sitting up. At the sight of them, she pulled herself somewhat shakily to a standing position and brushed back her blonde hair. "What happened?" she asked. "He bumped his head on the bulkhead," said Phillips shortly. This was accepted without comment. They turned to the instruments and examined the dial of the range indicator. "They aren't very far away," said Donna quietly. "Where do you stand now, Phillips?" "I suppose we'd better do it," he admitted. "Pretty vicious, aren't you?" "No," she snapped. "I don't like it either. I've never caused the death of any human being." "Oh, sure. That's why you're on Luna." She looked at him levelly in the eye, but her shoulders drooped a trifle, with the resignation of one who has often been disbelieved. "My husband was a nice guy," she murmured, "but he never did know when he had a drink too many for piloting his jet. He passed out trying to give me a wild ride, and I got to the controls just in time to crash land the rocket. That's where they found me before I came to." "Oh," said Phillips. "I'm not half as hard as I'm trying to pretend," Donna went on. "Even after a year on Luna. But I was a nurse before I was married, thinking about what it would be like if this plague hits the planets before they find something to fight it with. The children. Imagine that, will you?" Phillips stared at the range indicator. It seemed there were times when an ugly thing had to be done for the common good. He wondered how the old-time executioners had felt in the days when there had been judicial homicide. There were still jailers, for that matter, and men who butchered cattle. "Call it a mercy killing," murmured Donna between pale lips. "Maybe you think that isn't still done once in a while, in spite of modern society." Phillips grunted. "Well, if you can watch at this end, Truesdale and I can go and set up a couple of torpedoes. I hope those rocket blasts didn't give us away." "According to Varret," said Truesdale, "there can't be many of them still able to think straight enough to stand on watch. I wonder what it's like." Phillips glanced askance at him, but led the way into the corridor. First of all, he stopped at the rocket room to check the tube readings. The fired jets had been automatically recharged. They left the rocket room and climbed the ladder to the turret. Once inside, Phillips spent the first few minutes inspecting the equipment and thumbing through the manuals left there by Varret. Finally, the bored Truesdale broke in upon his study. "That old goat must be crazy to think he could toss us out here and have us act like a trained crew. How can we even hope to do anything right without blowing ourselves up?" "We can try," said Phillips coldly. "It shouldn't be impossible to get one started, at least." He found the twin control panels in the bulkhead and pulled a pair of switches. There was a smooth humming and a slight click as two hatches in the deck slid open. Slanting metal chutes rose out of the dark apertures just behind the conveyor belts. "Look at those babies," breathed Phillips. The snouts of two miniature spaceships protruded from the storage hold. Phillips touched other switches, and the sleek missiles were prodded onto the belts. and moved forward until their full 20-foot lengths were in view.
Phillips, you'd better be careful with